Casey. And this is about the Dodgers. The Dodgers, I think, have their closer in Mike Kopech. I was skeptical on him coming, but so far he's been great for the Dodgers bullpen and closed 2 games. I say ride with him forward as their closer and likely go with him the rest of the way closing.
I think so. Now the question is, how many fastballs does he have in that arm? His back-to-back, he was clocked over 100 miles an hour each of the last 2 appearances when he got the saves on the weekend. I think there's a little bit of concern about overuse. So that means that, they may go back and they'll go to one of the other closers to give Kopech a day off. But he's a former starter who had a high ERA. He was a 4 or 5 inning pitcher, threw the hell out of the ball, higher in run average in Detroit with the White Sox. But here in a very different defined role, he can pitch back-to-back days. Now, you don't want him throwing 51 fastballs over a 2-day period. So they'll have to monitor that. But he's been lights out ever since he got there. As I said, what was the stat I had? 13 innings pitched. He's allowed 1 hit. He struck out 30-some batters. It's an absolutely amazing stat.
Doesn't it blow you away how many pitchers can throw triple digit?
Yeah.
I mean,
and most of them are on the disabled list, Tommy John surgery, too.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, back in the day, it was like Nolan Ryan and maybe J.R. Richard, and that was it. I mean, now there's all these guys throwing heat. It's incredible. So, Kopech is an interesting guy. I mean, because Phillips, he kind of came out of nowhere and became the closer. I didn't really.
He had been in Tampa Bay.
Is that where he came from? Okay.
So, good comment. Dave Roberts must have heard what I said, because I said on this podcast last week, give the ball to Kopech, let him be the guy. Next question, John.
Okay. Now let's go to Chris, and he always likes to channel the Hacksaw shtick. Here we go. Saw, I've got a headline for you to pound into your classic Underwood manual typewriter. Stick a fork in Easton, most ineffective backup in football. Also, take some calls on the ladies' line about Nick Cage playing our national treasure, John Madden.
Okay. Is Chris from the Raider Nation out of jail on bail? Is he a Raider fan calling us?
Could be. It's last name Curry.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to handle it differently because it's really late to get a veteran backup quarterback unless Taylor Heineke becomes available, because he's in camp, which means he's in NFL shape. Got a lot of experience, 2+ years with the Washington Commanders and what he's gone through in Atlanta. I might look at him. It's way too late in the game for Ryan Tannehill to show up. That's the big issue there. And who knows if he's in any type of football shape. It just takes time. But, my alternative for Easton Stick, and he hasn't set the world on fire, is you can put in a special package to run the offense if he has to play because Justin Herbert's hurt, and a special package devised to let him do what he does best, which is move the pocket and run pass option, because he has done that in the league. His only problem is he's not been able to get the team in the end zone. He was 0-4 as a starter at the end of last season when he had to replace Herbert, and they just really struggled to score touchdowns. So I don't think they're going to release Stick unless Heineke becomes available, and we'll find out as roster cuts come a week from now.
It's got to be tough, to be a backup quarterback. You're on the bubble, and then you're probably pressing in the game, and then it doesn't work out. I mean, he's got to be, pretty nervous right now, I would say.
I sit there and watch him, though. He's a 5th-year player. He's been in the pro ranks 4 years as a backup. So it's not like this is the first time he's ever faced live fire action. I can understand how freaked out Stetson Bennett is, because he sat all of last year while he dealt with the mental health issues. He didn't throw a football in practice on a backfield in Georgia. So he's back trying to get up to speed, and he's doing it against rookies. But if you're asking me, I'd take Stick over Stetson Bennett at this point in time, only just based on experience. Now you have to change the offense a little bit to play to his strength, but that's where they're going to go. And, if the Matthew Stafford hamstring injury of the Rams is significant and they got to play Bennett in the first 2 games because of the Jimmy Garoppolo suspension, the Rams got a problem because Bennett's not ready to play.
Well, and not every team has Steve Young backing up Joe Montana.
You got that right.
Okay. But you're not going to say anything about Nicolas Cage and John Madden?
I want to see what the set design looks like. We're talking about the biography they're going to do on John Madden. But when they dye his hair and he puts weight on, and then we'll see if he develops the mannerisms of John Madden, it'll be fascinating to see. Anything's possible. Movies are great, and there's a lot of theatrical unique things that happen when you take an actor that you know and you put him in a very different role. It's the makeup and how his mannerisms, do they match John Madden? It's good. That'll be fun when we get there.
You know, I really like Nick Cage on some of the movies he's been in, like Peggy Sue Got Married, was Raising Arizona, and all those ones about stealing the Declaration of Independence. He's good, but I can't picture him as John Madden. That just doesn't fit for me.
Well, but you give him gray hair and you make him loud and you put some weight on to actually look like Madden. Anything's possible.
Okay.
It's Hollywood. It's the movies.
All right.
Next question.
Okay, let's go here to John, talk a little Chargers. He says, if the Chargers need a quarterback, they need to call Atlanta with Cousins and Penix on the roster. Tyler Heineke is going to be available. Heineke put a scare in Tom Brady when he was with Washington.
He did. I mean, I followed the kid. The kid played at 1AA football, Old Dominion, and he got progressively better and better. And he wound up being a starting quarterback because of injuries and because of the mess that the Washington Redskin Commanders became. He's competitive. He's a little bit fiery. I do think he's an intellectual leader, and he'd be my first pick if he goes on waivers. And then we'll see if the Chargers would pick him up. They're going to need somebody. This Herbert foot injury, there's no guarantee he's on a practice field this week. There's no guarantee that he doesn't have a setback when he gets on the practice field as they begin the game prep for the first game of the regular season. You know, a week from today, they're going to be in game prep mode. They do now. Grant you, they do have a 2.5 week window here to get him on the field, but there's no guarantee he does not have a setback because those plantar fasciitis arch injuries, they can take a longer time to heal. So they got to be concerned about that. I like Heineke.
Well, how about one of the quarterbacks from Denver? I mean, because one of those guys is going to fall out, right? Either Zach Wilson or Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah, and some of that's going to be salary cap related because Stidham has a higher cap figure than Zach Wilson. Zach does not have guaranteed money. Stidham does. Stidham's a journeyman. He's played marginally. He hasn't played as well as when he started as Heineke has in Washington. That's why I like Heineke at this point in time. But again, we're talking backup quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Zach Wilson, I don't know that you can trust him. I mean, when I saw Zach Wilson at the tail end of last year, I was kind of aghast at how really poor he was in his reads and how late he was making passes and throwing in the coverages and just being late getting the ball there. And this is not a rookie. This is a guy that was a third-year guy with the Jets, and I just said, that's it. Enough is enough. So
what was the deal? He was dating his ex-girlfriend's mom, I think, for a while.
You read that stuff on the social page. I'm reading the sports page. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, John.
Let's go here to Gary, talk Padres here. Part of the puzzle is having the capable Solanos, Peraltas, Wades to step right in and produce. Double-edged sword having athletes like Kim giving their all to make a play and finally injuring themselves. It's a long season and things are bound to go wrong a few games. Funny with the Rockies, maybe Bud Black. We are in such a roll right now. Tatis will be back, and I think we are fine and stacked, and our best baseball's ahead of us.
Could be. You know, we got 7 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, 40 plus games to go in the season. Don't know any timeline on Tatis. You know, they're being very cautious with El Nino just because, I mean, he's not running. You know, you can stand in a cage and just take a stride and swing a bat, and you can stand out in front of the dugout and do soft toss. But he's not doing any heavy-duty baseball-related stuff because they don't want to have the stress reaction fracture in the thigh bone happen again. It takes so long to heal. So that they say they think he'll be back in September, but you know, we're 10 days out or so from September 1st. So we'll see how much they're going to get out of him. And he can't have any setbacks when he gets ready to high octane it and actually start to do the baseball things he needs to do.
Yeah, that's going to take time and you can't rush it. But, you know, I think Gary brings up a good point. We have all these capable pieces. I mean, hasn't Solano been just a find? You know, I mean, it's been so good. And he makes the plays at third base. I think he's serviceable at second base. Fortunately, the Padres have depth, and I think they can make this work for them. And, you know, we love Ha-Seong Kim. We do, but he hasn't been hitting as well as he's been hitting previously. He's making a few more errors than we normally expect. So maybe this might have a silver lining to it.
Well, he's hurt, and I think it's significant. Now, I hope it's not a torn labrum. I hope it's not a dislocation, but I think he's going to be out a chunk of time. I also think this might be the finest work of general manager A.J. Preller. I mean, not just the blockbuster trades and all the controversy about trading the whole farm system away. His acquisitions of role guys is just huge. I mean, they would not be where they are right now within a stone's throw of the first place Dodgers. They're 3 back. It wouldn't be there right now had it not been for Peralta, had it not been for Higashioka, the catcher, had it not been, obviously, for Solano, and then some of the unique pitchers that he's brought in. So I think this might be his best year as an executive in Major League Baseball. It's about time.
It is about time. But it's funny, the people on Instagram responding to your videos, they're saying, what the heck, Hacksaw, you were tearing down the Padres. You're saying they needed to sell, fire AJ Preller, and now you're praising him.
Well, he was on the hot seat when the opening day started. What was the storyline around Major League Baseball? Who's in trouble? Well, his name always came up. But new ownership, he got the job done. Dude's got them within 3 games of first place. We'll see if we can get to September and then get to October and play meaningful games. Think this town would go crazy if this thing's wound up in the World Series because the Dodgers finally crumbled under the weight of all these injuries?
Anything's possible, and it's kind of feeling a good vibe right now.
Okay, on we go. Next question, fans forum.
Okay, let's go here to Raul. He goes, I'm shocked that the Dodgers are still in first place. Let's see what the season holds for all of us.
Yeah, we still got, as I say, 6 or 7 weeks. Dodgers are getting their guys back healthy, but now they got Freddie Freeman hurt. And if he's got tendon or ligament damage in that injured finger, Raul, they got a problem because that's a big bat and a leader that you're going to have to replace. The other problem is somebody needs to figure out Ohtani. How does that guy hit 147 since the end of June? Yeah, he's hitting home runs, but 147 is absolutely stunning. But there's a lot of baseball to be played. My goodness, the last 6 games of the season, you think people are going to be going crazy?
Yeah.
Dodgers at Arizona. I should say Padres at Arizona. Dodgers hosting San Diego at the end.
It's going to be great. I mean, this is all setting up terrifically.
And right before we get to that last weekend, the last 6, Dodgers got to go to Arizona to play the D-backs before they face
the
Padres.
Yeah, so it's going to be awesome. I mean, there's been those moments where there was a legit pennant race for that last week of the season. It's always so thrilling. Now, they since changed it so the last game, everybody starts at the same time. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good thing, right?
Yep. It's a lot of baseball to be played, and there are going to be a lot of meaningful games during that course of period. Raul, thanks for joining us on Fans Forum. Next question.
Okay, let's get some football folks in here. And Derek says, the NFL did not give Rourke a fair shot, and neither did BC for sending him out after 2 days of practice.
Well, their quarterback up there, Vernon, yes, me too quick, not Garcia. The starting quarterback up there, he's been around the league, is very successful. He went down, I think it was with a knee injury. So they had to make an emergency call, and Rourke had just gotten cut. Rourke knows the playbook, knows the coaches. He came in, but on one day's practice, he's not ready to play in terms of timing, and he really scuffled and struggled, and Winnipeg ambushed him. But I do think Nathan Rourke's he'll get better and better collectively and pretty quickly too, because I think his game is made to play in the Canadian League. And when you say he never got a chance, well, he's a CFL quarterback who's a little bit undersized. His game is run and throw. They don't do that a lot in the NFL. And, he went, where was he? He was in Jacksonville. Well, they're paying all the money to Trevor Lawrence. He's not going to play in Jacksonville. And he was a third QB in Jacksonville. He went to the Giants. Well, they got Daniel Jones, and they got the Italian stallion there, Tommy DeVito. And he went to Atlanta, but there's Kirk Cousins at the front of the line. They drafted Michael Penix, so he doesn't get much of an opportunity there. So he gets cut. I thought he'd probably be on somebody's developmental squad for a 3rd year in a row, but he goes back to Canada. I hope it works. And I root for the kid because he's one of us. He went where I went, Ohio University. He's a Bobcat.
Remember the time that Baker Mayfield rolled in and picked up the playbook and played like the 2 days later and won?
Yeah. Oh, Josh Dobbs last year in Minnesota, journeyman.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Dobbs goes to Minnesota, had 2 practices and led him to a shocking upset win.
That's incredible when you see these stories.
But after a while, defensive coordinators will figure out. They'll catch up to what you're doing, John.
Now, let me ask you this. In a pretend world, would you rather have Rourke or Stick?
Oh, Stick, much bigger athlete, much better athlete. Both were great college quarterbacks. But again, Stick's got his limitations, and Rourke never got a chance to play in the NFL, really. We move on.
Let's go to Force Ghost Fabio. He says, No public funds should ever be used to build stadiums. We have homeless Americans and money is wasted on sports.
Well, that's a bit of a reach, Fabio. I mean, sports brings a lot to your community, the economics of a community. I understand the public stance, Mr. Capitalist over here saying, no more money for Richmond. We're not giving Dean Spanos any of our
No.
money, or Kroenke or whatever, although Kroenke paid for SoFi Stadium out of his own checking account.
Good.
But at the end of the day, having a franchise has great value to your community from a financial standpoint, and I think from an emotional standpoint. John, I swear to you, this community, despite the greatness of the Padres, this community emotionally is not the same since the Chargers left this community. So I think you need to work in partnership with owners, but the owners got to pay their share of the freight, and the NFL has the G3 plan that's supposed to be put in place. But to ask Cuyahoga County for $1.2 billion, so they pay half of the $2.4 billion dome stadium for Haslam, that's kind of far-fetched.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big ask. I mean, because if they did it in a property tax increase, I mean, it could be costing everybody a few $100 a year.
And not everybody's an NFL fan.
Exactly.
It gives a damn. I'll just ask what's going on at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City.
Yeah, exactly. So now one other interesting angle to this is that they were talking about building a dome stadium.
Right.
And obviously you think about the mistake on the lake and the Lake Erie and the snow and the weather. And that sort of has a little romantic angle to it as an old football guy. But now stadiums are like these Taj Mahals for rich people with beautiful food and women and drinks. And it's like a Vegas casino.
But the other aspect is a dome stadium in Cleveland puts it in the running for Final Four, puts it in the running for NCAA football playoff championship games. It becomes a year-long venue for a lot of really special events. It's just not the home of the Dog Pound and the Browns.
Right. Yeah, that sounds interesting to me.
Okay, we move on.
Okay, let's go down the list here. Let's go to Steve. He says, when will the Chargers cut Stick? He's trash.
Well, at this point, it depends who you can go get and how quickly you can integrate him into the system. And the fact that he is experienced and the fact that he knows this organization. And now, granted, he's scuffling and struggling with the pocket package that Greg Roman has kind of implemented because Herbert's going to be a pocket quarterback and Stick is a move of pocket and can run some RPO, run pass option stuff there. But you got to be able to get the right guy to come in. If Heineke becomes available, then the injuries change everything. You could lose your backup quarterback this weekend, and Heineke has value to the Atlanta Falcons. I would take Heineke just because of leadership and intellect and the fact that he started a ton of games for a bad Washington team. He took so many quarterback sacks in a bad situation, but he comes to work every time. So we'll just have to see what, the cuts start coming next after they play the final preseason game next weekend. By Sunday, Monday, Tuesday of next week, everybody goes from 90 down to 50, 53, and then you bring your developmental squad back.
Wow. You know what? I screwed up. I meant to click on this other comment from Steve because we've been talking a lot about Easton Stick already.
Go ahead.
And let's go here. And he says, what do you think of USC going at least 500 in the new conference?
It's going to be a challenge, but I tell you, they do believe this quarterback, 60-year guy, got a lot of experience. It's like a whole new football team, and they had to replace virtually all their wide receivers, although they do get Zachariah Branch back, and he's a stud, big, long, rangy wide receiver. They're 3 deep at running back. We'll see if the defense takes a monster step forward with Danton Lynn, who they stole from UCLA to become their new defensive coordinator. I'm fascinated, but UCLA, they have a lot of travel. I mean, they got a lot of time on airplanes going back and forth. So Lincoln Riley's, he's kind of being challenged by a lot of people nationally that you haven't done a good job. Well, 18-6 over 2 years, and last year was a mess because of injuries, and the defensive coordinator and Caleb Williams had to do it all by himself. I think they have a good season because they got great athletes, and they do have a lot of transfers coming in. Just we'll see if they hit the floor running. I think they'll have a better season than UCLA is going to have. I think it's going to be a miserable season for UCLA. With even though people like Deshaun Foster, he's got a quarterback that's hardly ever played, and he's got to replace a lot of people on the defense. I think Oregon is the best in the group that's going to the new conference. But they got a 60-year quarterback who transferred in, Dylan Gabriel, and all he's done every place he's played is just toss the ball all over the place. So I think Oregon's going to be dangerous. Washington, massive rebuild. So that's, they hired the coach from the University of Arizona, Jed Fish. That's a massive rebuild because Penix and Odunze and the tight end and the running backs are all gone. So Washington's I think that's going to be a tough season for them. So Oregon's going to be the best of the groups that are going.
Yeah, I saw Oregon rank 3
Yes.
in one of the preseason rankings. Yeah, Dylan Gabriel, I remember he was at Oklahoma, and he was the one that took over when Caleb Williams left.
Yeah.
And
he went from Central Florida, was supposed to go to UCLA, and then turned at the stoplight and went to Oklahoma, and then he's transferred out again.
Interesting. Now, other people have been saying that Oregon has this really great quarterback, but is that the kid that was at UCLA last year?
Yes.
And
he's a quarterback in waiting.
It was like, what's his name? Dante something, right? Yeah. So it's cool that Oregon's going to be competitive in the big 18 or whatever we're going to call it. But is USC playing on the road at Ohio State or Michigan?
I don't have it right in front of me. We could go find it.
That'll be the game to watch.
Yeah. These guys, UCLA, and USC have both got really tough schedules. Some of them at home, a bunch of them on the road, but we'll talk about that in the next week or so.
Okay.
All right. A couple more here.
Let's go to Neil here. And this is kind of the talking about running back the failed field goals. And he says, was it Crow, Marty, or that other corner out of Auburn? You remember that Auburn, Alabama one about 10 years ago?
Yeah. Cromartie's the one that had all kinds of problems off the field. And Cromartie came in here as kind of a gem, and they found him, and he was going to be a star. And he made some plays on the field, but it was so much problems. And then he got hurt. He kept getting hurt all the time. And there were so many problems off the field. He had so many kids out of wedlock. I think he had 7 or 8. It was really bad. And there was one interview. I was out at the Fortress. That's what I called it, Charger Park, because they try to control the media. And somebody asked him a question. Antonio, can you name all your kids?
Oh, hey, don't go there.
End of press conference. That was that. But they got tired of the act. They got tired of the fact he was always hurt. He wound up with a degenerative hip thing. He went to the Jets, and he made some plays, but he couldn't stay on the field. And then he had a knee injury, and then he retired. So,
I remember it was something like 8 children and 7 mothers or something. It was just really messy.
Baby mamas everywhere.
Yeah, it was very complicated. But the things I remember about Cromartie is I remember, that run back from the missed field goal. I remember him being a stud athlete, but I think it was the Chargers Jets game, the one that Nate Kading kept missing all the field goals. And there was a time when one of the Jets runners was coming into the second level, and Cromartie did like an ole, to let the runner go by. Do you remember that? That was a long time ago.
He didn't put his head in there to make tackles either. He might have been a good athlete who could run, he'd pick off balls and all that, but he would not lay the leather on anybody.
Yeah, well, bringing up, Neil's bringing up that Auburn one. That was one of the most amazing plays, I think, in college football I think I've ever seen. It's unbelievable. Okay, let's move on here. Let's go to let's go here to Emmanuel, and he says, can't wait for college football to start. This will be the first time I actually do see Big Ten games since both USC and UCLA are now part of the league.
Well, big arguments back in the Big Ten. It is Michigan and it is Ohio State. Penn State's really good. They got a third-year starting quarterback who's back. The rest of the conference is not what it used to be. That's going to be an issue. But you could be USC and UCLA coming in, but you might only be the 4th or 5th best team in what is historically a really good conference. I mean, USC is right there in the mix. I mean, they're going to be upper echelon, but whether they're as good as Ohio State or as good as Michigan, though Michigan's replacing a bunch of people, that's a big question. UCLA, they were picked 15th in the conference. I mean, they're going to be the doormat for a lot of people. Oregon is obviously going to be upper echelon. Washington is not. So love the start of college football, but right now that conference is driven by Ohio State, and Michigan always has, probably always will be. But here comes Oregon, and we'll see how different USC is, because they have to replace a lot of people.
It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Like, Greg has an interesting follow-up question on this with a twist. He says, Lee, is Lincoln Riley at USC on the hot seat this year? And then, any chance you go 3 days live on the podcast?
We're working awful hard right now. It's just not that we show up and do this kind of off the cuff. There's a lot of research that goes into the topics. And by the way, I write a lot on that award-winning website, leehacksawhamilton.com, which you should read. You find out the volume of information that I create and I write. And yeah, there's a few damn typos in there because I don't have enough hours in the day to spell check everything, but the volume of information. So I do work at it. We've talked about other ideas, but we got some other things we're going to might unhatch as we go. But 2 days right now is pretty good. And it does test the host a lot.
Well, the 2-day-a-week thing, I think we have a nice rhythm going right now, right? And
despite your shortcomings from left field, yes.
Yeah, despite that, but the way we release the videos like throughout the week in between each of the live streams, I think is helpful. But I think people are just used to having you Monday through Friday from 3 to 7, right? Or was it 4 to 8? What was the drive time?
Hell, when I first got here, it was 6 to 10, I think, and then it kept moving me up into drive time, and then they put me in the mornings.
Mm-hmm.
You imagine me in the morning waking you up, yelling at you.
No, you are drive home from work time guy, and that's when I remember listening to you in the beginning, and it was fabulous.
Yeah. Hey, we got a couple social medias here you want to throw at us?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go check out some social media. And hey, how about talking Raiders? We got to get some Raider comments in here. This is from Joey. He says, unfortunately for the Raiders, it's going to be another bad season. I predict 7-10 at best. We have no quarterback. Hopefully, I think that's Mark Davis, doesn't fire Antonio Pierce before we get a good quarterback. We will see. It's so hard being a Raider fan.
Joey, I'll agree with bits and pieces. I mean, Minshew can play. Now, they think they've really upgraded their offensive line, which has been a sieve. It's been a leaky part of their roster the last couple of years. So let's see if they can protect him. My question is, who's going to run the ball? I mean, they do have Zamir White, second-year kid out of Georgia, who was a power back, who had some big runs at the end of last season. But can he actually replace Josh Jacobs, who went to Green Bay? That's a question. Love the core of wide receivers. Love the tight ends. I do think offensively with Luke Getsy, they're going to move the football. Defensively, Christian Wilkins' arrival just makes that front much better. I think if the front is better, that allows the linebackers to do a lot of stuff. I like Diablo and the linebacking core with Spillane, et cetera. Secondary to me has got to answer some questions. I do like Nate Hobbs, but he has a lot of injury issues. It's just going to take some time. But I think Wilkins is a big difference maker. And if they can run the ball, if Zamir White can be a power back, then that's going to make Minshew better because you're going to have to respect the run some. But if Minshew has to throw it 48 times a game, he'll make some throws and he'll throw some picks and fumble the ball too.
Is Brock Bowers is one of the tight ends, right?
Yeah, the kid from Georgia.
Yeah, he's hella good.
And Mike Mayers, second-year tight end, Notre Dame, kind of an unsung guy. I think he's really good. So you got those two, and then you got the superstar in Devontae Adams, and you got the expatriate who really had a good season last year, Jacoby Myers. I mean, that's 4 quality guys. They couldn't keep Jacobs because of salary cap issues, but that if you had Jacobs there, man, that's a great group to put around the quarterback. So.
Doesn't Jacoby Myers sounds like a law firm, doesn't it?
Yeah, that or somebody that sells drugs. I don't know.
I know. But I just want to bring back the mystique of Raider Nation, and having these really powerful personalities on the team. I long for those days.
Well, you got one. Max Crosby. He's a hell of a guy.
Yeah.
He's turned himself into a hell of a player, and he is a hell of a personality, too.
Right on.
I told you the story about him in Eastern Michigan and what he did for his alma mater.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
With donating $1 million and then showing up at the press conference and stealing a press conference from everybody and just putting on a great show. And that's a self-developed guy who made himself out of something. When he was in college, he had all types of issues with substance abuse and, family issues. And he's become a citizen. He's become a great player. So thumbs up to Mad Max.
He's become a citizen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't say that very often about anything related to the Raiders.
Okay. We got to get some Kaepernick comments in here. So let's go to this one. This is from Hurtado. He says, Kaepernick is a cancer in the locker room. At 38, he's not a viable option for backup quarterback. If you bring him in as an assistant coach, there are a couple of things that happen. Number one, you run the risk of him spreading his hate and disrupting the locker room. Number two, it's a slap in the face to all the hardworking individuals who have been grinding for that opportunity.
Well, he's not coming as a player. He's been away from it for 7 years. If he had accepted the offer in February, right after Harbaugh got hired, he'd be in here as a consultant or as an intern. He's not going to be the offensive coordinator. But, you may be in grudge mode about the whole flag situation. I was till I found out a lot more about Kaepernick. But at the end of the day, he's an intellect. At the end of the day, he is a leader. And he was a really good player before he got hurt. And the reason his production eroded was he was playing with a shoulder injury. He eventually wound up having surgery. So you have to separate the football issues and how he got hurt from the social issues and what he tried and the statement he tried to make. And everybody hated him early and everybody rallied around him late. And I told John last week, one of the most vivid pictures was the end of that season, where by that time everybody had accepted the players had a right and a responsibility to express themselves about social issues, where they stood locked arm in arm, players, all the staffers, the coaches, and Jerry Jones, arm in arm with all the Dallas Cowboy players about social issues. And he created that, and he kind of walked through the fire by himself. So I would think next January, if I'm still doing this podcast and John's not in jail, I think if we're here in January, I bet Kaepernick comes in as some type of offensive assistant coach.
That's interesting to see him as a coach.
Yeah, he and Harbaugh are on the same wavelength.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it was a ballsy move when Harbaugh benched Alex Smith to make Colin Kaepernick the quarterback. But you know what this reminds me of is I remember it was like 2 summers ago. I was in St. Louis, and we were there to see a Cubs-Cardinals game, and we were hooking up with some family from Texas, my son and I and a couple other guys. And we were hanging out just before the game talking, and at the time, they were really upset about Team USA, the women's soccer team. You know, they didn't like the way they were disrespecting America, disrespecting the flag. And I was, you know, for me, I don't take it as much of an insult as a lot of other people do. But I think being around people from other parts of America, you understand how passionate they feel in their hate of Colin Kaepernick for this. For me, I thought he was very brave in doing what he did. But for other people, it's persona non grata. There is nothing that can be said to change their mind.
The only thing is I was aghast that he did it. And again, this host comes from an all-military background. I was aghast that somebody would do that to the flag, because the flag is America. The flag is freedom. The flag represents your ability as a great player to make $14 million a year, which is what he was making at that point in time. But obviously, America's got some severe social issues. I was terribly offended. And I remember writing a column about it. How dare you do this? Blah, 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 blah. Anyhow, as the holdout, the lockout, the blackout, whatever you want to call what happened to him occurred, I found out other things that he had done. And I'll just briefly, if you have not heard the podcast, he personally has financed after-school lunch programs in Frisco, in Oakland, and back in Reno, where he played, for inner-city kids every year out of his own pocket. And we all know how tough it is in the inner city in broken homes and families. These kids go to school without a lot. These kids go to school without eating. He's done that. And then I found out he went to Ghana, and he is big on the history of Black America. He went to Ghana and he wrote a check of his own pocket for $1 million to build the first pediatric hospital in that African dirt poor country. He did this on his own. So as much as we may condemn him from what he did, the interpretation of the flag, the way this all ended up with how everybody else around the NFL rallied around him, and the way the NFL eventually wound up supporting him, and then what he's done personally, to me, it changed my opinion. May not change yours, but, Rudo, I'm just telling you what I discovered about the guy. And to this day, the guy's still doing civic things in those communities where he lives.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to the story than I think most people are getting from the mainstream media. I was going to say something I thought important, but I guess it's not important.
Okay, how about a couple more social media before we cap this?
Okay, this is a comment on the Olympics. I thought this was nice from David Ramos. I agree about the events at the Eiffel Tower. Seeing the cycling and going underneath was amazing. Paris did an amazing job hosting.
Yeah, I've been to Paris. I mean, it was an absolutely phenomenal trip. And then to see the events wrapped around all the historical things of Paris were really, really cool. And I mean, the biggest thrill to me, I was in the Palace of Versailles on a travel group. I said, oh, this is amazing history that goes back to World War I and even before that. Okay. And then to see the Olympic marathon run through the gardens and around Palace of Versailles was really, really cool. So, and we got the chance to watch it, and the NBC ratings were phenomenal. And by virtue of all their other network affiliates, they were able to put all the events live on some of the different channels, including Peacock. And then their packaging of the marquee events at 7:00 every night for the West Coast fans, I think NBC deserved a gold medal for what they did. And then all the storylines and the athletes and the accomplishments and the disappointments. That was one of the coolest Olympics I think I've ever watched.
I can't think of any other sporting event that has as much cultural impact as the Olympics do. I mean, the Super Bowl does in a weird way, but it's different, because the way they bring in a lot of these investigative reporters and these interesting storylines, and they tie history with sports together. I think it's really cool.
And yet they still have to operate the Olympics with the myriad of political crisis that our country has to deal with. I mean, I've never forgotten Munich in 1972.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never forgotten that, and just mesmerized watching it on TV. And that was the point of hijackings and kidnappings and things of that nature. And unfortunately, this situation here with Ukraine and Russia, that's front and center. And you've got all the civil unrest in Africa and Haiti and some of the Central American countries. It's tough, and because it is a truly global sport, but there's some spillover globally. It's what's happening to these athletes in the countries. I mean, the 2 medal winners from Ukraine who had to flee from their cities because Kiev was getting bombed and their buildings and their houses were destroyed, and trained. And then they went and got gold medals in the Olympics as, quote, refugees. Now they're going back to Kiev. I mean, that's a phenomenal story of accomplishment. And that's part and parcel what the Olympics can be, because it is a, quote, global sport.
Yeah. I mean, it's just fabulous. Everything about the Olympics is great. Hey, how about we roll the clock back to 1980? And the Olympics were in Moscow. And I remember Jimmy Carter said, we're not sending American athletes. Did you agree or disagree with that?
I kind of disagreed with it, only because you have the athlete who trains for 4 years for this event of a lifetime of their career. It's the pinnacle. And they don't get to go. Now, you could say, hey, they get to go and they get hurt, they don't get to the pinnacle because they got hurt. But so it's a big issue. But there's politics everywhere. And of course, then we had the Winter Olympics here, and Russia was saying, we're not sending our guys. And of course, we had Team USA. This is the Lake Placid Olympics. Team USA's hockey, they were geared. They built that hockey team to beat the Russians, and suddenly the Russians were saying, we might not send them. Then eventually they relented, and they did send them, and Herb Brooks' team got the gold medal, which is historic. So if you like sports movies, if you like hockey movies, find it, watch it. Miracle. It's the Herb Brooks story about Team USA and what those guys did. So, but politics, unfortunately, has always been entwined, and drug cheating, and what goes on in the Soviet Union, what's gone on in China. And that's why drug testing has been ramped up so much to try to stop the cheaters. But politics are still, it's as big an issue as the actual events are.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember the Munich thing. I was only 7 years old, but I remember, a little bit of that. The thing I was just thinking about Lake Placid, and I remember how they built up that city and the arena was really neat. But then I remember reading one time that I guess they had the Winter Olympics in Squaw. Well, so I'm thinking Squaw Valley in California, didn't they?
Squaw Valley is Idaho, isn't it?
I thought it was near Tahoe.
Might be. On geography's a little gray area there. But yeah, the Squaw Valley, that was back in the 60s, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
And they had the Olympics in Lake Placid, I want to say in 1932, maybe. They had the Winter Olympics there too. But then they built up new venues. I've been to Lake Placid. I've been to that arena, which is kind of cool. It's really old. And I went to the ski lift. I went on the top of the mountains where the actual ski lift is, ski jump. It's really cool looking down into the valley. And you think about ABC and White Roller Sports and all that stuff. It's kind of
where really is neat. Lake Placid? Is it like near Syracuse or Buffalo?
It's northwest of Albany. You got Syracuse, Albany on the New York State Thruway. Lake Placid is kind of in between both of them. If you had a triangle, Lake Placid would be in the northern Adirondacks.
That's kind of close to your old stomping grounds.
It's close to I worked in Utica, and my cottage is up in the Adirondacks. You do not want to be there unless you're a winter enthusiast after October 15th.
Okay. All good.
All right. Hey, listen, we hope you have enjoyed this long, extended segment of Hacksaw's Headlines. We apologize because I won't shut my mouth and he keeps talking. Hope you've enjoyed all the content because we try to do something really different. We're here Mondays at 1 p.m. with bonus coverage. We're here Thursdays, The podcast is brought to you by Dixieline Lumber and Home Centers. We want you to share, tell everybody what we're doing. We want you to subscribe. You'll get all the alerts for the YouTube channel. Check my website, join Hacksaw's Insiders Group. And when we're done and we say goodbye on this podcast, I want you to go right to X, to Twitter, and make sure you become a follower at Hacksaw1090. Hit the follow button. John, take a deep breath. We'll talk more NFL football. Final weekend preseason. We definitely will talk pennant race baseball when we're back here on Thursday.
For sure. And, I just checked on Twitter, you have like 9,800 and something followers. So you're, really close to 10,000.
We're trying to get to 10,000. Push us over the top.